She was sitting so still it looked unnatural. Not the stillness of a bored child waiting for her name to be called. Not the dazed, half-asleep quiet of a kid who had gotten up too early that morning. This was a different kind of stillness, the kind that comes from someone who has been taught, very carefully, very deliberately, to disappear. The Maplewood Family Health Clinic in rural Hargrove County wasn't the kind of place that saw drama. Tuesdays were slow. The waiting room had beige walls, plastic chairs the color of old mustard, and a television mounted too high on the wall, quietly playing a cooking show nobody was watching. There was a woman with a toddler on her lap, an elderly man filling out insurance paperwork, and then, in the far corner, a man in a red polo shirt, leafing through a magazine, and a small girl beside him. She looked to be about 9 or 10. Dark hair pulled into a loose braid, pink shirt, white sneakers with a small scuff on the left toe. She sat with her hands folded in her lap, her back perfectly straight, her eyes trained on the floor in front of her. She did not fidget. She did not look up at the TV. She did not do any of the things children do when they are waiting. Nurse Patricia Delgado noticed her the moment she came out to call the next patient. Patty had worked the front desk and intake at Maplewood for 11 years. She had checked in hundreds of children, wailing babies, squirming toddlers, teenagers glued to their phones, elementary school kids who immediately started asking how many shots they were going to get. She knew how children sat in waiting rooms. This was not how children sat in waiting rooms. Patty called a name on the intake form, Sophia Reyes, and the man in the red shirt stood up immediately. He reached down and took the little girl by the shoulder, not roughly, but firmly, the way you steer something, not comfort it. The girl rose without a word and walked beside him toward the door. She never looked up. She never looked around. She walked exactly 2 steps behind the man, her eyes on the back of his heels. Patty held the door open and gave the girl a smile. "Hi, sweetheart. How are you feeling today?" The girl opened her mouth, and then her eyes flicked sideways, fast like a reflex. She glanced at the man. He wasn't looking at her. He was already walking toward the intake room, asking about parking validation. By the time the girl looked back at Patty, the moment had passed. "Fine," she said quietly. Then she followed the man through the door. Patty watched them go. Later, she would tell investigators that something felt wrong the moment that child looked at her father before answering a simple question about how she was feeling. It was like she needed permission, Patty said, to say she was fine. And that was just the beginning. Because 20 minutes later, the clinic's only physician that morning, Dr. Marcus Webb, would be looking at something on a light board that would make his stomach drop. He would be staring at it for a long moment, making absolutely certain he was seeing what he thought he was seeing. And then he would quietly excuse himself from the examination room, walk to the end of the hallway, and pick up his phone. The call he made would set off a chain of events that would unravel one of the most disturbing cases in Hargrove County's history. But right then, in the waiting room, nobody knew any of that yet. Right then, it was just a Tuesday. Beige walls, plastic chairs, a cooking show nobody was watching, and a little girl who had forgotten how to look up. His name, according to the intake paperwork, was Daniel Reyes, 43 years old, single father. The address he listed was a rural route number on the far edge of Hargrove County, the kind of address that meant a long gravel driveway and no close neighbors. He had a calm voice, the practiced ease of a man accustomed to speaking with authority. When Nurse Patty asked why he brought Sophia in today, he answered before the girl could even shift in her chair. "Stomach problems," he said. "She's been complaining for about a week. Some nausea, trouble sleeping, probably just a virus." He said it the way you'd read from a list. Efficient, prepared. Sophia sat on the examination table with her hands folded in her lap, exactly the same way she'd sat in the waiting room. She was watching the floor. Patty bent down slightly to make eye contact with her. "Sophia, can you show me where it hurts?" A pause. Then the girl slowly pressed her hand flat against her lower abdomen. "Does it hurt all the time, or just sometimes. Another pause. Another flicker of the eyes toward the man standing at the edge of the room. He said nothing, but he was watching. Sometimes, Sophia said. Patty noted the weight and temperature, both within normal range, though Sophia's resting heart rate was slightly elevated. When she asked Sophia to take a deep breath in for the pulse oximeter, the girl complied in total silence, looking straight ahead at the wall, stiff as a photograph. Later, Patty pulled Dr. Webb into the hallway before he went in. "I need you to go slow with this one," she said quietly. "There's something off. The kid won't talk unless she checks with the father first. Every single answer, even basic stuff." She looked at him before she told me she was fine. Dr. Marcus Webb was 51 years old, with graying temples and the calm, unhurried manner of a doctor who had practiced in a small town long enough to know that medicine was rarely just about the body. He had seen abuse. He had seen neglect. He had seen fear dressed up in 100 different ways. He nodded slowly. "I'll take it from here. Can you keep the father occupied for a few minutes?" Patty managed to engage Daniel Reyes in a conversation about insurance forms, just long enough for Dr. Webb to spend 5 minutes alone with Sophia. Even 5 minutes was almost impossible. The moment Daniel Reyes stepped into the hallway, Sophia's entire body changed. It was subtle, but Webb caught it. Her shoulders dropped about half an inch, like something inside her had unclenched just slightly. Her eyes came up from the floor. Dr. Webb sat down on the rolling stool, so he was at her eye level. He kept his voice the same way you might speak near a deer you didn't want to startle. "Sophia, it's okay. You're not in trouble. I just need you to help me understand where you're hurting, so I can help you feel better. Can you do that?" She looked at the door. "He can't hear us from the hallway," Webb said gently. She looked back at him. There was something in her eyes he would later describe as exhausted calculation, the look of a child who had learned to weigh every single word before she said it. "My stomach hurts," she said. "Right here." She pressed both hands against her lower abdomen again. "It's been hurting for a while." While meaning a week. Or longer. She hesitated. "Longer," she said finally. Dr. Webb wrote that down. He asked a few more questions. Her diet, her sleep, whether she'd had any falls or injuries. To each one she gave short, careful answers, never elaborating, never volunteering information. Then he said, "Sophia, I'm going to have my technician take some pictures of your belly from the inside, okay? Just to make sure everything looks right. It won't hurt at all." Something crossed her face then. It was fast, there and gone in less than a second. It looked like fear. Not the ordinary fear of a medical procedure. Something deeper than that. Webb ordered the imaging and stepped back into the hallway. Daniel Reyes was already finishing up with the paperwork, ready to come back in. He smiled at Webb, an easy, confident smile. "Everything okay, Doc?" "Just being thorough," Webb said. And as he watched the man walk back into the exam room, he thought about what Patty had said. That child looked more frightened of her father than she did of the pain. Webb was beginning to understand exactly what she meant. The imaging suite was 2 doors down from the main examination room. It was a small, clean space, slightly cooler than the rest of the clinic, the way imaging rooms always are. The equipment hummed with the low, constant sound of machinery waiting to be used. Radiology technician Carol Stein had been running abdominal scans at Maplewood for 7 years. She had seen appendicitis, bowel obstructions, gallstones, cysts. She had seen things that worried her and things that turned out to be nothing at all. She positioned Sophia carefully on the table, explaining each step in a calm, practiced voice. The girl lay still, unnervingly still, Carol would later note, and stared straight up at the ceiling. The scan itself took less than 4 minutes. Carol uploaded the images to the system and sent them through to Dr. Webb's workstation. Standard procedure. She expected him to review them, probably order a follow-up or prescribe something mild, send the family home. She was already thinking about her next patient. Down the hall, Dr. Marcus Webb was sitting at his workstation when the images populated on his screen. He pulled up the abdominal series, the standard anteroposterior view first, the lateral second. He leaned forward in his chair. At first glance, the scan looked almost normal. The stomach, the upper intestinal structures, nothing dramatically alarming. His eyes moved lower, scanning along the digestive tract. And then he stopped. He leaned closer to the screen. There, distributed throughout the lower abdominal cavity and into the intestinal tract, were small objects. Dense, uniform, clearly foreign. They showed up bright against the surrounding tissue. Hard, sealed, tightly packed things. Webb had seen foreign body ingestion before. Children swallowed coins, buttons, small toys. It happened. But this was different. These weren't accidental objects. They weren't random. They were too uniform, too deliberate. He counted. Slowly. Carefully. 14. 15. 16. More than 20 small capsule-shaped objects, distributed through this child's digestive system in a pattern that told a very specific, very disturbing story. Dr. Webb sat back in his chair. His mind went somewhere he didn't want it to go, somewhere that reached back 5 years, to a continuing education conference in Nashville, where investigators from the DEA and a pediatric specialist from Chicago had presented a case study. It had been a grim session. The subject, the use of children as internal carriers for drug trafficking operations. Swallowed packages, the investigator had called them. Small pellets or capsules, drug-filled, tightly wrapped, ingested deliberately and designed to pass through the system. Sometimes the children were coerced. Sometimes they didn't fully understand what was happening to them. Sometimes the packages ruptured, and then it became a medical emergency, and sometimes a homicide. Webb remembered sitting in that conference room, thinking, I will never see this in my clinic. Not out here. He looked at the screen again. 22 objects. He had counted 22. He took a slow breath. He picked up his desk phone and called Carol in the imaging suite. Carol, I need you to run the full series again. The lower abdominal and pelvic region. And I need you to make sure the father stays in the waiting area and does not come into imaging. There was a pause. Is everything okay, doctor? Just run the series again, please. He hung up. He stared at the images for another moment. The capsules. The girl's fear. The way she checked her father's face before speaking. The stomach pain that had been going on for longer than a week. None of it added up to anything good. But that wasn't even the worst of it. Because when Webb pulled up the rest of Sophia's intake file to check her vaccination history, routine procedure, something he always did on new pediatric patients, he found something that stopped him cold all over again. The records were incomplete. The paperwork on file showed a birth certificate, a vaccination card, a prior medical history form. All of it looked real at a glance. But as Webb went through it item by item, the inconsistencies began to surface. Small things, the kind you'd miss if you weren't looking closely. The birth certificate listed one hospital. The vaccination history referenced another city entirely. The handwriting on 2 separate forms appeared to match too closely, as though completed by the same person at the same time. And the girl's date of birth. Something about it was nagging at him. He wasn't sure why. Not yet. But he was about to find out. Dr. Webb did not make the call from the nurse's station. He did not make it from the hallway, or from the reception desk, or from anywhere that Daniel Reyes, currently seated in the waiting room with a magazine and an impatient expression, might hear even a fragment of what he was about to say. He walked to the very end of the clinic's east corridor, through the supply room, and out the side door into the staff parking lot. The late morning air was cool. He stood beside a rusted metal bench that nobody ever sat on and dialed the non-emergency line for the Hargrove County Sheriff's Department. The dispatcher who answered heard the steadiness in his voice first and the urgency underneath it second. This is Dr. Marcus Webb calling from Maplewood Family Health Clinic on Route 9. I have a situation I need a law enforcement consultation on, as discreetly as possible and without alerting anyone currently in my facility. He paused. I have a child patient. Female. Approximately 10 years of age. Her imaging shows a significant number of foreign objects throughout her digestive tract that are consistent with internal drug concealment. I also have incomplete and potentially falsified medical records. And the child's behavior during her examination is concerning. Significantly concerning. There was a pause on the other end. Can you keep them there, doctor? I can try. But I'm going to need someone here within the next 30 minutes before the father starts pushing to leave. 2 sheriff's deputies and a detective were dispatched. They were told not to arrive with lights or sirens. Detective Renee Caldwell, who had spent the last 4 years with the county's Crimes Against Persons unit, took the call herself. She had worked 6 child welfare cases in the past year. Something about the specifics Webb described, the behavior, the records, the imaging, made her put everything else on hold. She made one additional call before she left, to the state's Child Services emergency line. Back inside the clinic, Dr. Webb returned to the waiting room with the practiced ease of a man who had been doing this a very long time. Sorry for the wait, Mr. Reyes. The imaging came back, and I just want to take a closer look at a few things. These abdominal cases, sometimes the pictures tell us more than we expect. He smiled professionally. Sophie is comfortable in the imaging suite. Would you like some coffee while I finish reviewing? Daniel Reyes checked his watch. A small frown crossed his face. How much longer are we talking? Probably another 20 minutes. 30 at the most. Webb kept his voice easy, unhurried. I want to make sure I'm thorough before I send her home. Reyes looked at him for a moment. A second too long, Webb would later say, like he was reading something. Then he sat back down. Fine, he said. Webb returned to his office and pulled up the National Missing Children database that all licensed medical providers in the state had access to. It wasn't something he used often. In 11 years of practice in Hargrove County, he had never had reason to use it at all. He typed in the girl's approximate age, physical description, and the geographic region they'd listed on the intake form. The database returned several possible matches. Most of them he was able to rule out quickly based on age or physical characteristics. But one entry made him stop. There was a case, listed as active, filed 3 years ago in Claremont Falls, a small city about 240 miles north of Hargrove County. A girl, reported missing at age 7. The case had gone cold after an extensive regional search turned up no leads. The entry included an age progression photo. Webb looked at it for a long time. He looked at it, and then he looked at the photograph he'd taken of Sophia during intake, standard procedure, required for all new pediatric patients at Maplewood. The shape of the eyes, the particular angle of the jaw, the hairline. He was not a forensic specialist. He knew that. He knew facial comparison wasn't his field and that he could be wrong. Could be seeing a resemblance that wasn't there, driven by a morning that had put him on high alert. But the resemblance was not subtle. He picked up his phone and called Detective Caldwell. You need to see something when you get here, he said. I think this may be more than a trafficking case. Her name had been Lily Vasquez, 7 years old, brown hair, brown eyes, a smile that her mother, Elena Vasquez, described as the kind that made you smile back without even meaning to. She had disappeared on a Thursday afternoon in October, 3 years ago, between the time her father dropped her at her after-school program and the time her mother arrived to pick her up. The window was 45 minutes. The after-school program was in the gymnasium of Roosevelt Elementary School in Claremont Falls. There were 17 other children there that afternoon, 2 adult supervisors, a single exterior door that led to a side parking lot. Witnesses remembered seeing a man speak to Lily near that door. One child said Lily had gone with him, but the descriptions varied. Medium height, dark hair, possibly wearing a jacket. The one security camera covering the parking lot had a corrupted SD card and hadn't been recording for 6 days. The Claremont Falls Police Department, the county sheriff, and the state's Missing Children Unit all deployed resources. They searched parks, waterways, abandoned buildings. They interviewed registered offenders within a 40-mile radius. They followed 63 separate leads over 4 months. Every single one of them went cold. Elena Vasquez continued holding press conferences for a year and a half. She printed flyers. She maintained a Facebook page that she updated every single Thursday, the day of the week Lily had disappeared, with a new photograph, a new message, and the same phone number. By the time 3 years had passed, most of the county had quietly moved the case from active to likely deceased. Elena Vasquez never did. Now, in the Hargrove County Sheriff's Department, Detective Renee Caldwell sat in an unmarked car in the parking lot of Maplewood Family Health Clinic and looked at the age progression photo on her laptop screen. She looked at it next to the intake photo that Dr. Webb had just emailed her. She felt something in her chest that wasn't quite certainty. Not yet, but was something very close to it. She called her supervisor. "I need the Claremont Falls case file. Everything. And I need a facial recognition consult ASAP." A pause. "And I need someone to very quietly position themselves at both exits of this building." Inside the clinic, Daniel Reyes was on his feet. It had been 35 minutes. He was at the reception desk, voice low but clipped, asking when exactly the doctor would be finished. He said Sophia had a dentist appointment in the afternoon. He said they had a long drive home. Patty told him Dr. Webb was almost done. She said it with a smile she had been practicing for 30 years. He sat back down, but he wasn't reading the magazine anymore. He was watching the door. When Detective Caldwell walked through the clinic's front door, she was not in uniform. She wore jeans, a plain jacket, and the unhurried expression of someone who had maybe stopped in to ask about a prescription. She badged the front desk discreetly and was taken directly to Dr. Webb's office. They spent 6 minutes together. Webb showed her the imaging. He showed her the records, the inconsistencies, the 2 photographs side by side. Caldwell looked at them for a long time. Then she said, "We need to speak to the girl. Alone." The logistics were delicate. You could not simply remove a child from a parent's custody in a medical facility without either consent or a court order. And they had neither. Not yet. What they did have was a medical provider with legitimate cause to conduct a private examination and a detective who happened to be present. Dr. Webb returned to the waiting room. He told Daniel Reyes, in a tone that left no room for argument, that he needed to perform a brief physical evaluation and that clinic policy required the examination to be conducted without a guardian present for children over the age of 8. A real policy, as it happened, though Reyes didn't know that. Reyes didn't like it. He stood up from his chair. "That's not something I agreed to. It's standard protocol, Mr. Reyes. It won't take long. You can wait right here." Webb's voice was even professional, firm. "I'll come get you the moment we're finished." A long pause. Reyes sat down. "Webb went to get Sophia." They brought her to the small consultation room at the back of the clinic. Not the examination room where Reyes had been present, but a separate space, quieter, warmer, with a small couch instead of an examination table. Caldwell sat across from Sophia in a regular chair. No desk between them. No uniform. "Ah, Sophia," she said. "My name's Renee. I'm just going to talk with you for a little bit. Okay? You're not in any trouble." The girl sat on the couch with her hands in her lap. She looked at the door. "He can't hear us in here," Caldwell said gently. "And he's not going to come in." Something happened then. The same thing Webb had observed, but more pronounced. The girl's shoulders fell. Her chest expanded slightly, like she had been taking shallow breaths for hours, and had only now remembered she was allowed to breathe. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then she looked at Caldwell and said, very quietly, "Are you a police?" "I am," Caldwell said. "Is that okay?" Sophia thought about it. "He said police couldn't help me," she said. "He said if I talked to police, I get sent somewhere bad." Caldwell kept her voice steady. "That's not true. I promise you, that's not true." She leaned forward slightly. "Can you tell me your name? Your real name?" The longest pause yet. "He calls me Sophia," she said. Before they call me Maya. And before that. She pressed her lips together, working at a memory. Danielle, I think. When I was little. Caldwell wrote nothing down. She didn't want a girl to see a pen and shut down. Do you remember where you lived before? Caldwell asked. Before you came to Hargrove County. Different places, she said. We move a lot. He said we had to keep moving because people were trying to take me away. Who told you that? She tilted her head toward the waiting room. Caldwell reached in her jacket and slowly, giving the girl every chance to see what she was doing, removed a photograph. She turned it face down on the cushion between them. I'm going to show you a picture, she said. I just want you to look at it and tell me if it means anything to you. You don't have to say anything if you don't want to. She turned it over. It was a family photograph. A woman, dark-haired, mid-30s, warm eyes, and a little girl sitting on a park bench. The little girl was laughing at something. Her hair was loose, and she was wearing a yellow coat. Sophia looked at the photograph. For 4 seconds, she didn't move. Then something in her face broke open. Not all at once, but in stages, the way ice on a river fractures before it gives way. Her eyes filled. Her lower lip trembled. She reached out with one finger and touched the corner of the photograph, very gently. She didn't say the woman's name. She didn't say anything for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. He told me my real family didn't want me anymore, she said. He said they gave me away. He said that's why we had to keep moving. So I would understand I couldn't go back. The room was silent. Caldwell let the silence stay for a moment, the kind of silence that a child deserved after carrying something that heavy for that long. Then she said, very softly, "That wasn't true, sweetheart. Not a single word of that was true." By 3 o'clock that afternoon, the parking lot behind Maplewood Family Health Clinic held 4 unmarked police vehicles. Daniel Reyes had been detained, not arrested, not yet, but placed in a separate room with 2 deputies while the legal scaffolding came together. He had demanded his rights, demanded a lawyer, demanded to know where Sophia was. He was told she was continuing to receive medical care. He had gone quiet after that. The quiet of a man who understood, perhaps, that the room was shrinking. Search warrants for Reyes's property on the rural route had been submitted to a county judge who turned them around in under 2 hours. By 5:30 that evening, a team of investigators was moving through the property, a 3-bedroom house at the end of a gravel road, set back from the tree line, with a rusted mailbox and no close neighbors for half a mile in any direction. What they found inside would take 3 days to fully document. In the main bedroom, inside a false panel at the back of a closet, investigators discovered a lockbox containing 7 separate sets of identification documents. Different names, different states, different dates of birth. Each set was complete: birth certificate, social security card, vaccination history, and in some cases, a school enrollment record. None of the children named in the documents appeared in any legitimate state database. In a kitchen drawer, tucked beneath a stack of takeout menus, they found 3 prepaid phones. Forensic extraction of those phones would take time, but even the call logs visible on the screens told a story. Dozens of contacts listed only by city names. Dallas, Phoenix, Memphis, Laredo. In the garage, sealed inside a plastic storage bin, was a collection of photographs. The photographs showed children, multiple children, different ages, different appearances, photographed in what appeared to be different locations at different times. Some of the photographs showed Sophia, at various ages, with various hairstyles, in various locations. Others showed children the investigators did not yet recognize. Those photographs would later become central evidence in an investigation that expanded far beyond Hargrove County. Back at the clinic, Dr. Webb had sat down in his office when the adrenaline finally gave way. He was looking at the second set of imaging results Carol had run, because in the focus on Sophia's identity and history, The medical reality had not gone away. Those capsules were still inside her. She still needed medical care. A pediatric specialist had been called in from the regional hospital 40 miles north. The specialist confirmed Webb's assessment. The foreign objects were consistent with drug trafficking concealment methodology. They would need to be addressed. Sophia would be transported to the regional hospital for observation and, if necessary, intervention. She would not be going home with Daniel Reyes. She would not be going home with anyone. Not yet. Not until the investigation confirmed what Caldwell and Webb were now almost certain they already knew. But the DNA would make it official, and the DNA results were moving faster than anyone had expected. Elena Vasquez got the phone call at 7:22 in the evening. She was in the kitchen of her apartment in Claremont Falls, doing the same thing she did every Thursday evening, looking at the Facebook page, reading through the comments other parents had left, the shares, the occasional message from a stranger who said they were still thinking of Lily, still hoping. She had received calls before. 3 years of calls, from tip lines, from law enforcement, from well-meaning people who thought they'd seen a girl who looked like her daughter. Every single one of those calls had ended the same way. She almost didn't answer this one. When she did, the voice on the other end belonged to Detective Renee Caldwell. And in the first 10 seconds, something in the detective's voice was different. Something measured. Careful. The way people speak when they are trying to hold something large and fragile at the same time. "Ms. Vasquez," Caldwell said, "I need to tell you that we have a child in protective custody in Hargrove County who we believe may be your daughter. The preliminary indicators are very strong. We are waiting on confirmation from a DNA comparison." Elena Vasquez said nothing. "I know this is a lot," Caldwell said. Elena still said nothing. She was holding the phone very tightly. "The DNA results are being expedited. We expect confirmation within 24 hours. But I wanted you to hear it from me directly, and I wanted you to know the child is safe. She is receiving medical care, and she is safe." What Elena Vasquez said after that, she later described in a victim impact statement as not real words, not language, just sound. She said she slid down the kitchen wall and sat on the floor and held the phone against her chest for a long time after the call ended. The DNA results came back the following morning. The match was confirmed at 99.97%. The girl in protective custody at Hargrove County Regional Hospital, the girl who had been called Sophia, who had been called Maya, who had been called Daniela, was Lily Vasquez, age 10, missing for 3 years, 1 month, and 14 days. The news moved fast. Within hours, the story was on regional television. By evening, it was national. The details emerged in waves. The clinic visit, the X-ray, the quiet call from a small-town doctor, the investigation that had been spiraling outward ever since. The community of Hargrove County, which had known Daniel Reyes as a quiet, unremarkable man who kept to himself, sat with the revelation the way communities do when something they thought was ordinary turns out to have been something else entirely. People who had waved to him at the gas station. People who had stood behind him in line at the hardware store. People who had thought, if they'd thought of him at all, that he was just a father and a daughter going about their lives. Nobody had looked close enough. Except one person. In a regional hospital, Lily Vasquez was being seen by a team of pediatric specialists, a child psychologist, and a child welfare advocate. The capsules had been addressed. She was recovering well, physically. The psychological road ahead was a different, longer journey. But she was safe. And in 24 hours, she would meet her mother again for the first time in 3 years. That meeting was not filmed, not documented, not released to the press. Elena Vasquez later said only that when she walked into the hospital room and her daughter looked up from the bed, neither of them said anything at all for a long time. "I just held her," she said. "That was it. That was everything." The trial of Daniel Reyes, his real name, investigators confirmed, though it had also been Daniel Ruiz, Danny Rios, and at least 2 other variations over the previous decade, began 14 months after his arrest at Maplewood Family Health Clinic. The charges were extensive: child abduction, child trafficking, conspiracy to traffic controlled substances, forgery and fraud. The federal government joined the case when evidence from the 3 prepaid phones linked Reyes to a multi-state trafficking network that had operated for at least 7 years. Investigators ultimately identified 6 children who had been transported through the network. 4 located alive. 2 cases remained open. The community that had once seen Reyes as an unremarkable neighbor now watched the courtroom proceedings with a quiet, horrified attention. A man who had moved through their county, lived on the edge of their town, bought gas and groceries, and stood in the same lines they did, and all of it had been a shell, a surface, a story told to people who were never given a reason to look underneath it. The evidence presented at trial was overwhelming. The imaging from Maplewood, the falsified records, the 7 identity kits recovered from the property, the photographs, the phone records that painted a detailed map of transactions and movements across a dozen states. Reyes's defense offered very little. There was too much to explain away. The jury deliberated for 11 hours. When a verdict was read, Elena Vasquez was sitting in the gallery with her sister on one side and Lily's court-appointed advocate on the other. Lily was not present. She was not yet 12 years old, and her psychologist had advised against it. Guilty, on all counts. The sentencing came 3 weeks later. 47 years. There was no celebration in the courtroom. There rarely is in cases like this. There was something more like an exhalation, a long, collective breath that the people in that room had been holding for a very long time. Elena Vasquez issued a statement afterward that she read quietly into a microphone outside the courthouse. She thanked law enforcement. She thanked the hospital team. She thanked, specifically, Dr. Marcus Webb and Nurse Patricia Delgado at Maplewood Family Health Clinic. And then she said this: "My daughter was in that waiting room. She was sitting right there, in a room full of people. And one person noticed that she was scared. One person asked the right questions. One person thought that something small and quiet was worth paying attention to." She paused. I spent a lot of time thinking about how differently this might have ended. How many people Lily might have walked past who didn't see it. I am grateful, every single day, for the ones who did. Dr. Marcus Webb, for his part, gave only one interview in the months following the trial. He was characteristically modest. "I was trying to treat a child with stomach pain," he said. "That's all I was doing. The rest of it, the right questions, the right calls, the right people showing up, that's a team effort. I was just the first link in the chain." He paused for a moment. The important thing is that the chain held. Lily Vasquez spent 2 years working with a child psychologist and a trauma-informed therapist. Her recovery was not linear. It never is. But by her 12th birthday, her mother said she had started laughing again. Real laughing, the unguarded kind. She started school with other kids her age. She made a friend named Priya who sat next to her in reading class and shared her lunch. She got a kitten that she named Button. She learned, slowly, that her real family had never stopped wanting her. She had just been told, for 3 long years, that they had. That was the lie at the heart of everything. Not the fake names or the forged documents or the careful geography of a man who moved his crimes from county to county, state to state, staying just ahead of the people looking for him. The worst thing he had taken from Lily Vasquez wasn't her name. It was the belief that she was loved. It took time to give that back, but it came back. It always does. If this story stayed with you, if you found yourself thinking about the people in that waiting room and the one set of eyes that happened to look closely enough, then you already understand why the small, quiet, overlooked moments matter. Not every hero makes a dramatic entrance. Some of them are just paying attention. What would you have done sitting in that waiting room? Would you have noticed a child who forgot how to look up? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Every view, every share keeps stories like Lily's alive. Subscribe for more true crime investigations every week. We'll be here, paying attention.